So last time we left off talking about Nietzsche's hypothesis of the will to power, his explanatory hypothesis of the will to power, namely that the will to power, or power, explains everything for him. It explains religion, it explains all of human behavior. Most importantly, it explains value, ethics, ethical value. Now, here's the interesting thing. If there is only power, if Nietzsche's right, let's take this idea seriously for a second. If he's right, if reality can be explained, or human behavior can be explained in terms of power, then Nietzsche notes something else very interesting. Because a lot of times people will accept this hypothesis of Nietzsche and say, yeah, I think that's true. I think power is, generally speaking, the best explanation of why human beings interact, or how human beings interact. But they don't like his next inference from this. Namely, if there's power, then reality inevitably bifurcates into two groups, those with power and those without power. That is, those who are strong and those who are weak. Now, Nietzsche asks us something very interesting, or asks us to consider, something very interesting here. If there are two groups of human beings, those with power, those without power, the strong and the weak, the victimizers and the victims, the rich and the poor, the beautiful, the ugly, however you want to slice this, there's always winners and losers. And I said earlier, the genealogy is, in a certain sense, Nietzsche's explanation about Western culture. He wants to unearth the conditions for the possibility of Western culture, and he found those are power. But in particular, what is Western culture's primary set of values? Well, it's Judeo-Christianity. And so Nietzsche has something interesting to say here. He says, if reality bifurcates into those with power, those without power, why do we assume that we should take the side of those who are weak, of those who are victims, of those who are poor? Why should we care about weak people? Why should we care about victims? Why should we care about people who are oppressed? Why shouldn't we side with the perspective of those with power, or those in power, the strong? It's interesting that Nietzsche notes this, that the word virtue comes from the Latin virtus, which means manly or powerful, or the Greek word, we'll see when we get to Aristotle, arete, means something like noble or high-ranking. And Nietzsche thinks that prior to Judeo-Christianity, particularly Christianity's influence, which it got from Judaism, nobody thought of morality in terms of compassion, or siding with the weak, or mercy, or concern for victims, the oppressed, the persecuted. Right now, we're inundated in our culture with a concern for victims, which I think is a good thing. But what Nietzsche's saying is, you think that's just in everybody's mind automatically? It's not. We care about victims today, or we care about those who are persecuted, immigrants, minorities, members of LGBTQ, anyone who is in a position of weakness. We automatically assume that we should have compassion and concern for them, which of course is a good thing. I'm not arguing against that, although Nietzsche might later, he will. Nietzsche's saying, where does that come from? Why do we care about this? It comes from 2,000 years of catechesis in Judeo-Christian morality. Nobody cared about victims until Christianity's influence, Christianity's Judaic influence. And that has a lot to do with perspective, okay? Perspective. Nietzsche is a perspectivist. He's a relativist. Another word for relativism is, in a sense, a perspectivist. He thinks there are two perspectives in morality. There's the perspective of the powerful, and there's the perspective of the weak. For some reason in Western culture, the weak perspective won. The weak perspective won. And this is what he's going to talk about in your text, beginning in section 7 of the first essay, but most clearly in section 10, the slave revolt in morality. The slave revolt in morality. Another way he considers this power differential, or this power bifurcation, is in terms of masters and slaves. Those with power, those without power.